Shalom, brothers and sisters. There are many types, typologies, and things that we can connect through where we're getting a picture that can be applied to different scenarios or timelines and events in the Word of God. One of those that I found really interesting that someone pointed out a year or two back that made sense to me is Moses went up to God on the mountaintop. Israel remained below, not touching the mountain. The same way that Moses, a type of the church, will go up in the rapture to God, and Israel will remain at the bottom below when it comes to that final week of Daniel and the time of tribulation. The next thing we see is if we go to Exodus chapter 24 verse 16, it says, "Now the glory of the Lord rested on Mount Sinai, and a cloud covered it 6 days. And on the 7th day he called to Moses out of the midst of the cloud." Right, before I read further, and I'm going to read further, numbers mean things. And for 6 days the cloud rested on the mountain, and on the 7th day he called to Moses out of the midst. 6,000 years is the time of man, and on the 7th day there's a removal, there's a restoration of Israel, and the 1,000-year reign. All those things are going to be happening in this final stretch, and we're coming up on that. We are removed just at the end, towards the end of the 6th day, because we are not destined for wrath. Then there's a period of wrath, and then there's a 7th day in which Israel, the remnant that comes out of the fire, will be restored. Now if you read on in verse 17, it says, "The sight of the glory of the Lord was like a consuming fire on the top of the mountain in the eyes of the children of Israel." So Moses went into the midst of the cloud and up into the mountain, and Moses was on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights with God. So the connection here again is we see God as a consuming fire. And here in the end, he's promised never to destroy the world with flood waters again. But the last time, now at the end, it's going to be with fire and judgment. There is a flood of judgment coming. And God is a consuming fire, will be using the sun and heat to deal with mankind. So there is that flames coming. So the 40 days and 40 nights gets touched on there briefly. And it's really quite something interesting to look into. If we look at that, there's a lot of places in the Bible, many, where it refers to 40 days and 40 nights. But I want to point out just a few for you. In Genesis 7 verse 12, it tells us God was so troubled by the wickedness of the world that he planned to destroy all life, with the exception of those righteous few on the ark. And rain fell on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. So there's that connection to this passage we've read in Exodus. Then after Jonah's rebellion against God, he didn't want to go to Nineveh. He prophesied about God's wrath to the Ninevites, telling them they would be destroyed in 40 days. Jonah 3 verse 4. The same way we are now prophesying and warning and shouting out about the coming judgment to these Ninevite-like people of our generation. Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah. Genesis 25 verse 20. The same way as we are now on our way to the wedding supper of the Lamb. The Israelites wandered 40 years in the wilderness before they entered the promised land. We, the church, the redeemed, are about to enter the promised land as promised by him who is faithful. After his crucifixion and resurrection, Jesus remained and walked with his disciples for 40 days and nights before ascending to heaven. Acts 1 verse 3. And he ascended in the clouds, and the two angels said to them, the same way he went, he's coming again. He's going to come and collect those that he loves. Those that he promised he will return once he has prepared a place for you. He will do the same thing. 40 is also the typical number of weeks a woman is pregnant before she gives birth to a child. Now that for me is also spectacular, because labor pains of the end times, they will say peace and security, and then sudden destruction will come upon them. like a woman in labor. All these things tie together and speak to you about the imminent arrival of Jesus Christ for his bride. We need to be excited. We need to be looking up. We need to be encouraging one another and speaking hope into the situation of a hopeless world. God bless. Have a fantastic day. Shalom.